Welcome to the Westminster Effects Doxology Podcast, where we exist for the glory of God and the tone of his people. I'm Cody Fields. Go buy stuff for your guitar at westminstereffects.com. Join the discussion in the Westminster Effects Green Room on Facebook, and make sure you hit like, subscribe, all that good stuff, whether on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, etc., and follow us on the socials. I'm not joined by Old Lutheran John or the Right Reverend Bradley Cox, but via the internet, I am joined once again by Steve Cobucci of Wolves at the Gate. Steve, welcome back.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, so you just came out with a new album. Tell us all about it.
Wow, such a broad question.
Right. Well, we got to start vague and then we'll get specific.
It's an album of music that we wrote. They are original songs. I think this is our 6th or 7th full length.
You've really been at this a while.
Yeah, and I think I had the most fun making this album out of any of them.
Really?
So, yeah, it's been a lot of fun, challenging in different ways, but rewarding, and I think it's been good for us as a band. We've all kind of enjoyed banding together to put it together, so it's been fun. Yeah,
so you really took a turn in multiple directions on this album, right? Like stylistically, but the fact, especially that it's a concept album that's telling a broader story than simply compressing one story into a song, maybe.
Right.
And so you've gone from, like on your 5x5 album, one of your songs starts with quoting Hebrews, right? Mm-hmm. You've got on, I think it's your last album, a Spurgeon reference, Kiss the Wave. Mm-hmm. You've got all kind of stuff like that. And now it's this sci-fi concept thing. How did you get from that, Spurgeon references, quoting Hebrews? I believe you have a John Piper clip on one of your older songs, and now it's sci-fi concept stuff.
Well, I think exactly for the reason that you just stated, as long as we've been a band, we've tried to, we're always trying, we're not ever trying to make the same record. But you do after a while try to just think about how can I communicate the same thing in a different way? Because the thing that people, I think, forget is a few things. One is we're not writing songs to be sung in church. It's not what we're doing. And we're also not preaching sermons. And so we're making music just as a form of art, and we're Christians, and we want people to hear the gospel because it's a great message, and it's truth, it's life, it's hope, it's everything. But the thing that we have found is sometimes the most effective ways for people to understand something that they either may think is too simple, or to understand something that they're not interested in, is to, as C.S. Lewis says, to sneak past the dragons, and to, like what he did with Narnia, is to deliver powerful truths about, the nature of who God is and God's message to the world, which is the good news of the gospel, which is just incredible that would be what God wants to tell anyone. And that this is who God is, and that he is a savior to his enemies. And so trying to find a way to, paint that picture through with a different paintbrush, basically. So what we're doing is honestly not much different than what we have been doing in the past. But we're trying to just hit it from a different angle. That's how I would say. Yeah.
Interesting. You brought up like the people think it's too simple. You can also do the opposite of that. You can break down concepts that some people may think are too complex.
Yeah, exactly.
Where, Lewis does that with substitutionary atonement in the first Narnia book is Aslan takes on the punishment. Yeah, you're right. Because there are a lot of components
the gospel is very deep and it's also very simple at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's sort of the beauty of it, is that there are ways in which you can dive deep and you're going to chase down those depths for the rest of your life. But there's a way in which it can simply be said, we've sinned against God, but God has saved us in Christ, you know, and that is, he sent the Savior in Christ. Trust him. You know, you could say the gospel in a few sentences.
Right.
And sometimes that simplicity reaches people, and sometimes the complexity draws people to a place of awe and wonder, and hopefully repentance and faith through that. So
love it.
Yeah.
So what were some influences to get you into writing a concept album? Like, is this a Coheed and Cambria influence that you've never told anyone about, or like what's going on there?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of loose influences. So, I mean, Coheed and Cambria, I never like got into the lore of it, but conceptually, I like the idea of what they do. I think that's neat, and I think it's thoughtful. I think it's also somebody using another creative vehicle, you know, which is storytelling. And I've always loved that in music, how songs can do that. Loosely inspired by Thrice's Alchemy Index, you know, because there's a clear like theme, you know,
right,
to that, you know, 4-part EP sonically, but then lyrically, like the lyrics fit that world, you know, the fire, wind, water, and earth. And I think that was really neat. So there's lots of examples like that, you know, where bands have taken an album and not like rushed into it and just wrote songs, but tried to give you something a little bit deeper. And in this day and age, you know, singles are what drive everyone, but I think that's what the mass majority would say. But like people are looking for something that has intentionality and depth, and some people aren't, but some people don't know that's what they're looking for, and then they find it. So we're just trying to do something we think is either what people are craving or not realizing they want, which is I don't know, being a little bit more thoughtful and
like
giving people an album.
I've personally always been an album guy. If I have to hit skip 2, 3, 4 times, then why would I waste my time? But I also want to appreciate all of that effort that an artist has put forth to create those 10, 12 songs, right? And so like when y'all started putting out, you know, some singles, it's like, okay, that's great. I want all of it though. Because I don't want to just listen to one song all 95% of the time. And so when you started putting out singles, it's like, this is really good, but how is this going to all fit together? And now that Wasteland is all out and I can actually see, okay, so this transition from the end of this song is feeding into, and that's always really interesting to me.
Yeah, because I noticed there were like people at the very beginning. You know, we always get comments from people of like, if a song doesn't fit the criteria of what they're looking for or what they think makes something Christian, you know, to me, I kind of look at it as like, it's like you jumped in the middle of a conversation and you didn't get the context. Unfortunately, we live in a world where the way you have to market your music nowadays is by putting out like at least 3 singles. You know, when I was growing up, you heard one song before the album came out. And that was it, you know? And so, if it was up to me, 100%, I would love to just release the album, you know? But that's not the best, you know, investment, you know,
in terms of how the world works at this point.
And how people consume music. So,
So in terms of, we've referenced Thrice's Alchemy Index and stuff like that, and how you get to the concept album portion of things. How you evolved a little bit sonically as well. Like this album's heavier. It feels to me, and you know, tell me if I'm wrong here, it feels like there may be some more industrial influences, maybe a couple of nu metal influences almost here and there. And so it's a little bit of a shift from more of, maybe you'd call it a post-hardcore with some metalcore elements kind of deal, right?
Yeah, I mean, so when we started, we were post-hardcore with like probably like screamo elements, and then we were like post-hardcore with some like alt rock influences, and then it's like then post-hardcore with metalcore influences.
Yep.
The reality is I don't really think we just like so many different types of music that like we don't really know what our style is, in the sense of like we could just put our finger on it and say it's this thing, you know. Yeah, we just, when you listen through the album and read the lyrics, hopefully it was intentional for people to see why the songs were so dark and industrial, and it needed to we're trying to tell a story, you know, and the songs needed to fit sonically needed to fit the thematic elements for us to really feel like we were delivering it in a way that felt compelling and would actually deliver the proper emotion, you know. And that's what I've always loved about music and have tried to do in music. And so with that, we were just like, I mean, a lot of us like really heavy music, like way heavier stuff than we've ever done before. And so there's always that as a musician, there's always an itch that you haven't scratched. And, you know, we've been doing this for a long time. And so there's itches that we want to scratch musically, you know, and
you finally got the thing from Walmart to kind of,
yeah, yeah. And the reality is like, you know, it's the five of us who tell us what we are and what we want to be, and what we want to create. You know, people have expectations, but I've always just found that to be, yeah, it's like you can't go into hearing a song expecting something, because it's a creation. It's something you're making. It didn't exist before. And so you can't have a conception of what it's supposed to be because it didn't exist before, you know? And there's so many things that go into artists making music that, like, how could you assume these like thousands of variables would fit what you were expecting, you know? And that's part of what we want to do, is to do something that people aren't going to expect. And you just take a chance. And to me, like, yeah, you have to take those risks to grow as an artist. And you have to take those risks as well to maybe get people to listen or to think differently. And bands have done that for me over the years, and they've taken risks. And it's been a bit of a shock at first, but I didn't live in a world where I could tell them exactly what I'm thinking when their music comes out. You know, I grew up listening to music where you just listen to it on a CD player. There wasn't, a comment section where you could tell people like, I prefer this album. You know, I would have never thought to say that to any band that I grew up listening to.
How old are you?
I'm 38. I'll be 39.
Okay. Yeah. I'm 38 as well. Yeah. So like right there, it's like at the very end of high school, and then maybe early college years, you get MySpace. And then you get the very beginnings of Facebook, but you didn't have like Instagram and TikTok and being able to just message literally anybody in your favorite band.
Yeah. Yeah. And I find it so crazy, especially with comments, you know. It's just like, for me, it's just like in real life. It's like, if you don't have anything nice to say, you just don't say anything, because it's rude, you know. It's like, you know, and because I've met, you know, when I was younger, I met bands that I was a fan of. And even if their most recent album wasn't my favorite, like, I still told them, like, I love your music, because that's true.
Yeah.
And that's because I want them to know that, you know. But nowadays people are like, this song is not as good as this one. This album is not as good as this one. Why don't you go back and do this? And I'm just like, yo, keep your opinions to yourself. It's like,
like I took
like that we made that album, enjoy it, you know. You don't have to like tell us and everyone in the world like your opinion on everything.
Right. Well, I took something that was really helpful for me. As I took an art appreciation class in college, where he made a very solid case of there's a difference between something being good art, and there is objectively good and objectively bad art, and then something not being your taste.
Yeah.
Right. So, you know, there are certain elements of certain bands where it's like, I don't care for that, but I know it's good. I know that they're doing it well. I just don't like it. And then there's other bands where, like, I think we've lost this critical thinking within all the culture for just about everything, but particularly music. It's, if I don't like it, then it's terrible. Well, no, that's not how any of this works. Maybe you didn't love it. Maybe it'll take you a minute to digest. Like, this album, like it's so heavy, it's so dark, and it's such a curveball. Like, it's okay to digest this album and listen to it a couple of times and take your time with it.
Yeah, and give it a chance too. And the thing is like, I have pretty thick skin, so it's not like the comments bother me, but I also just think, like, this is the same person that's also maybe commenting on other bands or other things, and that may, like, really hurt somebody, like, or really make them feel low. And it's like, I just think it's like, man, what an ugly thing to do. Like, I just don't think that's what the comment section, the way it should be used. And, if we put out a song and there's 0 comments, that'd be pretty obvious that nobody liked it.
That's one way of letting them know, is to just not comment at all. Let me play devil's advocate, just because it dawned on me.
Yeah.
What if there's a comment of, and I'm not saying this about anything that you've put out, so this is not about this album or anything.
It's probably a comment we've received, so I'm ready.
Right. So if somebody says, this really doesn't sound inspired, it sounds like you were kind of bored and mailed it in, and maybe that's actually true, could that potentially jostle an artist out of complacency?
Yeah.
And be constructive?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, of course. But it really depends on, again, like, you have to think about the things that you say and who you're saying it to, and also, like, who are you to this person? And I think there's a way to say that isn't an accusation, because you don't know, you cannot accuse people of things that you cannot confirm.
Right.
You can't say,
that's biblical.
It sounds like you, exactly. It's like, you can't say, I think you phoned it in. You don't know that.
Right.
What if they really, like, tried their best? It's like they really love it, and maybe it just sounds like it was phoned in to you. So it's like, I don't think that people have the license to say that. I think there's probably a lot of other questions maybe you could ask before you could ever come to that conclusion.
Yeah.
But you really can't say that, because there's bands that I love that have made albums that I just don't enjoy at all.
Yeah.
Like, I just, none of the songs stick for me on an album.
Yep.
But it doesn't then make me go, they're not trying, they don't care, or, it's like, clearly they're super talented, because I love lots of their music,
Right.
So.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, big old concept here. What's going on with this story for the people who haven't maybe Googled it or listened through everything? Like, what's going on here? What's kind of the background of this?
Yeah. So I guess thematically, what we wanted to do is we wanted to create a world that a character is placed in, and, to use the elements of this world, to paint a picture of, their reality, and everything's metaphorical. It begins, the record, the whole record is supposed to describe what it's like for this character to live in this one, like, area of the world, which is called the Wasteland. And, if you look at the different elements of the album, the first song is called, the first full song is called Pain. You have Pain, Parasite, Law of the Land, Smoke, Death Clock, Memento Mori, and Unrest. Or I forgot Synthetic Sun, goodness. And so all these songs paint sort of a world of these different elements. So the first track is really just about, like, it's almost like Welcome to the World. This is what life in the world is like. And the first, like, lyrics of the song say, first light, pain, first breath, scream, which is, we were hoping would be a picture of what it's like when we're all born. What does every baby do?
Right.
It's like, you're sort of thrust into, you're pulled out of comfort,
Yeah.
And you're thrust into this world where, you're not attached to, an umbilical cord that just gives you food whenever you need it, and you're protected, and like, it's sort of just the beginning of experiencing the pain of this life, and the noise of this life. And that's kind of what we wanted to introduce the album with. And then, Parasite is supposed to be giving a picture of this, essentially our nature, our human nature, and the way in which no one has been able to escape being born in sin, and the inescapable reality of it, and how not only are we born this way, but we embrace it as well, and then wonder why there's so much pain while we embrace it.
So this is the song to send to Pelagians, right? I'm just kidding.
Yeah. You could send them all. Actually, send it to all of them. Yep. Yeah, and so the record continues on. In this world, they've created a synthetic sun, which is supposed to be a picture of we all by nature suppress the truth of God in unrighteousness, and we try to hide His glory and His beauty because we don't. Living under that is just condemning, right?
Yeah,
and that's sort of the problem, is because we have this broken belief by nature that God is not good. And
interesting. So what do you mean by that? Do you mean as in God is not good, as in He's not just, or He's not merciful? He's not.
Honestly, anything, any of His attributes, we don't see as good. We don't believe that He will do good. Because think about what did Satan do in the garden? He got them to question the goodness of God.
Yeah.
Right. Because He's saying He's keeping something good from you. Mm-hmm. He's withholding good from you, and you can't go to Him for good things. And so His commands are not good. His nature is not good. Everything He does is not good, because He is keeping good from you. And you can see how, that's where all of our brokenness and unbelief emanates from. And so that's what Synthetic Sun is about, is we recognize we can't live, without any sort of agreement of morality. And so we create our own morality. We create our own gods.
Yeah.
But all our own gods, we end up serving them. And they only can exist and live if we keep them alive, basically.
Yeah, and then you become like them.
Yeah,
I've been teaching our middle schoolers and high schoolers here at my church through our confession of faith on Wednesday mornings here, and it's kind of a blend between 1689 and Westminster. Where we think the 1689 may have gone a little too far in reacting and stuff like that. But one of the questions I asked is, well, why are we going to spend 7 Wednesdays talking about this stuff? And it's, well, you become like what you worship. And I don't want you to be dumb in worshiping a dumb God that you've invented, right?
Yeah. Yeah. To not know, Isaiah says, basically that animals know where they sleep and they know their masters, but we don't know our God. And it's such a wild indictment. And he's saying this to Old Testament Israel, but it's true of all of us, that it's shocking that, and animals understand, who their master is and where they're cared for, right? Yep. And where their care comes from.
Yep.
But we don't, and we won't. And so, Synthetic Sun really is sort of, light came into the world, but men love darkness rather than light, as we see in John. And so, the record just kind of carries through. Law of the Wasteland, or Law of the Land, is really just about the way that this is, Synthetic Sun sort of describing the fact that we create our own morality, our own gods, but Law of the Land is kind of and this is the result of it, and really it's sort of that repeated phrase, we see in Judges, which is, and everyone did what was right in their own eyes.
Yep.
And when you read the book of Judges, you read just the brutality of what life is like living that way. And we think that we've become so refined, but we've just refined our brutality, know.
The mercy of the wicked is still cruel.
Yeah. And we all are perpetrators of that.
Yep.
We're still, hating God and hating one another, which is, if you hate who God is, you're hating everything that is actually good. You're hating mercy and justice and grace and kindness and compassion. And then hating others, that means everyone's an enemy. Everyone is a potential enemy, truly. The only people we call friends are the ones that aren't obstacles to what we think our joy is or what makes us happy. And as soon as somebody gets in the way of that, they're not our friends anymore. They're our enemies. Yep. And that's why it's so radical when Jesus says to love your enemies. And we hear that. And if we don't have a new heart, we hear that as, why would I ever do that? Or maybe somebody sees the good in that, but they don't have the ability to do it. And so really that's what happens, in Law of the Land. And that's where the record really starts to turn, because the character begins to realize, if you read the lyrics at the end of, Pain, Parasite, Synthetic Sun, and Law of the Land, there is a sort of rhetorical question and lament that the character expresses each time about the futility of life this way.
It's going full Ecclesiastes.
Yeah. Well, it's you chase each one of these things down to its logical end, and what you will find is futility. And Smoke is the first time that the character's starting to face the fact that, he is just as evil as the world he describes, basically.
Yeah.
Because everyone always thinks, the evils the great evils of this world are outside, but the greatest ones are within our own hearts. And he's been trying to hide that. And it's kind of just the the old phrase is, you're blowing smoke. It's like you keep lying about who you are, and he eventually is choking on his own lies, because he realizes that he can't hide that. And that's when he realizes, the reason why he's afraid of admitting these things is essentially he's realizing the wages of sin is death, and that's what you kind of see fleshed out in the interlude. Withering, is he basically, says, he's starting to admit his sin, and he asks the question, is this why we all have to die? Because we're sinners. And that's where he starts to realize the sting of death. It's not just that we die, but we're dying because of something we've done, which is our sin. And death has a sting. And that's why everyone fears death. And that's where it brings us into the song Death Clock, and Memento Mori is really the beginning of, the gospel hope and promise becoming louder and more audible, which, if you listen to the album, front to back, hopefully the way we intended it and the way that hopefully people did listen to it, you hear at the end of the first song, it's really, there's a lot of static, but it's the beginning messages of hope, which is, a voice speaks through the noise, redemption for man. God has sent a curse breaker, but you can just barely hear it. And the truth of the gospel hope gets louder as the album progresses and more clear, to kind of paint this picture of the character realizing and recognizing the urgency of his situation.
Was there a Pilgrims Progress influence on writing this album at all?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's, I've always loved the way in which, that allegory, tells sort of the journey. That journey it's Pilgrims Progress definitely seems to be more in the realm of focusing on more of the Christian life. And I think ours focuses a little bit less, because we're really trying to aim our music towards those that are far from the Lord and don't know him. And so the first album really focuses on the idea of living selfishly and lawlessly, and the results of what comes with that.
Yeah, it's almost like a case study on total depravity with a how's that working for you kind of question.
And really it's just a diary of mine saying this is how these things worked for me. They didn't. They didn't work for me. And every time I've tried to pursue them, I've been met with the same end that I knew was there from the start, but that's the reality of the deceitfulness of sin, that it lies to you and it makes promises that it can't deliver,
Yeah. So last thing, which is kind of a big topic, is these music videos that you're putting out. When I first saw that you had put out a music video, I'm not a huge music video guy. So I was like, okay, cool, whatever.
Yeah.
And then I actually watched them yesterday and I was like, this is incredible, man. Like the production value is just off the charts. And it's just so powerful telling this story. And you only have 2 out of how many are going to come out with this album?
I mean, we released all the videos that are coming out for Wasteland. So,
okay.
Those are all the ones that have come out for Wasteland.
Gotcha. Okay.
There's been some speculation from fans, which we've noticed. But fair enough. It's not always correct.
Okay.
we neither confirm nor deny anything. So
I understand what you are saying.
The only time I like to be political.
These days with that climate, I don't blame you at all. Yeah. So, but it's 2 songs and 25 minutes worth of video. What was the thought process behind all of this and the production value and all that kind of stuff?
Well, I have to give a lot of credit to Garrett Drake and Kevin Johnson, who were a big part of bringing these to life. And it was really them who, brought the idea of, we had the idea of there being sort of like, a short thing before the video started, trying to be budget conscious, but when I sent them, the album and the concept and the story, they just really bought in and they were really excited. They're like, we want to tell this story. And I was like, oh, cool. And they came back with like really big ideas of how to deliver that. And so they basically said like, we want to try and make this a short film as much as possible. And I was like, awesome. I was like, we're going to need a lot of help because we're just barely able to make albums. We don't know how to make a short film. And so it's really just a testament to their creativity and their experience, and also their heart and their willingness. They want to tell the same story that we do, which, it was just so edifying for me. And just, I was really grateful. We've been making music for a long time. And if you want to say we've been in the music industry for a long time, and, there's been people who have liked our music, but not liked our message. And
sure.
And that's made working relationships strained at times, working with people that we're paying that make fun of us because of our beliefs, and want to make us feel uncomfortable for being a Christian, or wanting to protect certain things because we want a message to be clear. And so it was really cool to work with them, and there was no barriers. They were just trying to find ways to help us tell that story and tell it in a compelling way too. We didn't want it to seem like Christian media in the cheesy sense of the word, where it's like, as soon as you turn it on, you could just tell immediately. It's feels like a Lifetime movie,
Yeah. Or that, have you seen any of the clips of that movie that Ken Copeland starred in?
No, I mean,
he was in an action movie, like punching dudes out and stuff. Yeah.
Why does that sound like? That sounds like Threat Level Midnight. I don't know if you watch The Office. That's all it made me think about. Is like somebody's trying to live out some sort of like childhood fantasy.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, he's using a church budget to do that, I'm sure.
Right. Yeah, definitely look that up later. It pretty much is the Word of Faith version of Threat Level Midnight from the clips that I've seen.
I don't. It'll spare me from getting angry.
That's entirely fair. So with this video, or two videos rather, kind of walk us through, like, how close is this meant to mirror the album's story? Like, is it pretty much 1-to-1, or did you have to pick and choose? Like,
it's pretty close. So what we tried to do with the videos is let them be, so like there's only so much, like I'm explaining more of the story in some of these podcasts because there's only so much that you can explain in an album and with songs, you can't, and we wanted the music videos to, how can they help people understand different realms of the story in a way that the songs weren't. And so they're parallel is what I would say. They're parallel with each other. And so we wanted the music videos to maybe fill in some gaps that might have been lost and ways that we know can't communicate the story, like in a song,
right.
With even something as simple as like characters' names,
Mm-hmm.
and what the world looks like as best as we can. So it was cool. So I would say it's parallel. There's some slight differences because I tried to give some liberties to Garrett, who he's the one, he made it into a screenplay. I had just written a story out as like a narrative, and he turned into a screenplay. And I tried to just leave some room for somebody who knows how to deliver, that sort of thing better than I do.
Right, because every medium has its strengths and weaknesses. Movies can't necessarily get into the thought life of someone like a novel can and stuff like that.
Right. And so I really wanted him to, like run through his my story through his filter, because he would know how to bring that to a screen in a way that it would communicate like the emotions or thoughts of somebody, in a way that you don't say it, they have to show it. And they have to show it with dialogue in a way that isn't just saying I'm mad, or I'm sad, what's a compelling way to show sadness or conflict or pain or regret or guilt, and so, we're really happy with how that turned out. And, we're happy for Garrett too, because, he's been like submitting it to, like film festivals, which is cool. And which is exciting for me to, to hear that, the story is going to get put out there, in a different medium. And, we're hoping to keep adding to it, really.
Right. So 2 final questions within this. So what's the significance, and feel free to say, we're not answering that now. What's the significance of the first 2 characters that you encounter are speaking Spanish? Like that threw me for a loop. I wasn't expecting that at all, but it was super interesting.
Yeah. I mean, there isn't really any significance in the sense that, we meant anything by it. One, both of the actors, speak it fluently, and sort of the world that we're trying to build, I don't know. I wanted it to reflect the world that we live in. And that was really Garrett's call on that. But when I saw that in the script, I was like, yeah, that's great, because that feels, there's something about it that just feels authentic when I think about the world that we're trying to build with Wasteland, which is you're in a city, demographically in a city, it could be, it's just America is the melting pot of people. And so, I also felt that, I don't know, to me, like languages are beautiful, and, and sometimes to me, I feel like other languages, not that like I speak Spanish, but I watch a lot of things that have subtitles. I grew up watching, tons of, like, I was the guy that watched Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, with the subtitles, and just didn't listen to overdubs. I watched tons of like kung fu and karate movies growing up that I had to just read subtitles to. And there's something about, that at times that I feel like other languages, I don't know, like I get something different out of that, reading a subtitle and listening to another language. But there was no deep thought of like it means something. It's just these people speak Spanish. That's as simple as I would say it.
Fair enough. We'll leave.
There were some people that were up. Yeah, were up. They're like, oh, it means something political. I'm like bro, it does not.
This Justin Wolves at the Gate embraces XYZ political theory, and it's specifically the one that you don't like.
But people are just always looking for that, and it's just it's like you live in a huge world. And some people in this world don't speak your language, and that's normal.
Right.
And we put subtitles there because we're just to translate what they're saying, and also because we live in a big world with lots of different people.
Right. Right.
And it's as simple as that. But if you notice in the short film, Jess, the main character, also speaks Spanish. And so we're trying to like maybe paint this world in which it's not like the world that like you have to know other languages. Like if you're in Europe, everybody speaks English, but they also speak their native language as well.
Yep.
It's like you have to survive, if that makes sense. And that's sort of like the feeling we wanted to communicate is like this like feeling of surviving in this brutal world. Jess had to be able to speak Spanish to understand because he's interacting with other people, but Gabriel had to speak English, to like survive in this world. And so that's kind of what like a loose way that we were looking at. I love it. I love it. Yeah.
So last question with the videos, or maybe it's more of an observation, is you didn't pull punches on the brutality of this world, right? It wasn't gruesome. Everything was tastefully done, but you showed the violence. Which is something that I appreciated. Like one of the biggest rants that I could ever go on. If you remember the Narnia movies from years ago, and they've got these enormous battle scenes, and I'm not asking for like Mr. Beaver's tail to get lopped off, right?
Yeah.
but there's no blood, and Aslan tells Peter, "Clean off your sword," and it's sparkling already, and that's just not realistic for a battle. But there's blood involved here.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and I think, how are you supposed to communicate the things that we're trying to communicate?
Yeah,
and not depict that. Now, like our goal was for it to be realistic, but to not glorify, murder and violence in the sense that, like, for me, my belief is that violence should be avoided at all costs. Like it should be a like worst case scenario, last case scenario, and we just live in a society that obviously like embraces that, but we wanted to communicate it in an honest way and not to like look like we're edgy, but we just wanted it to be real, and fitting, how like that's what this character is. He's brutal, and how are we going to depict that if he's, like not actually being that? Because it doesn't, it takes away from the weight of what we want to communicate, which is the availability of grace for sinners, period.
And even the brutal ones.
Yeah. And you know what? It isn't an extra measure of grace or mercy. It's just the nature of God's grace and mercy is that he saves sinners. Yeah. He doesn't go, well, those brutal ones they're harder to save, or those really like the ones who just have just like thrown their lives away with every sort of vice. Their heart. No, every sinner required the same salvation, which is the blood of Christ.
Yep.
And the blood of Christ washes the foulest clean. That's I'm just thinking of like 10 hymns right now, but that's what we want to be depicted, and for two reasons. One is that we hope that those that are far off can see this like glimmer of hope and understanding in the gospel, and that they would come to Christ, but also for lots of people who don't think they're bad, that's probably where my heart is most broken over, the visible church and the way in which so many people, either claiming Christ or whatever, don't think they're that bad. Like,
you're echoing so many themes that we've hit on this podcast in the last couple of months, man. That's so good.
Yeah. And so, and a lot of that is just because there's a tendency that I feel in my own flesh, which is to be self-righteous, and I hate it desperately, because it is incredibly ugly. And, just because I never ... doesn't mean I'm not guilty of that. Again, you think about the words of Jesus: if you've had hatred in your heart towards another, you've murdered them.
Yep.
And the problem is that we just go, yeah, but I didn't actually murder somebody. It's like, that's not what God thinks.
Right.
When he sees that same heart as evil.
Yeah.
Just because you didn't have the means or the opportunity, or you weren't fearful enough of the consequences that you didn't do it. Those are the only things that were keeping you from it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, people, God knows my heart. Well, that should terrify you.
Yeah.
Or I think it was Vodi Bakum who said that it's God's common grace that babies are so small because they are also just as sinful that they wouldn't think twice about killing their parents in their sleep.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think we all try to get, like I said, sanitize the nature of who we are. But if we're really honest about the things that we've thought, the things that we've felt and desired, and the problem is a lot of people don't see their feelings or their thoughts as indicting, but they're not when there isn't a God who sees and knows everything. It's not indicting, but there is a God who sees and knows everything. And he does deal with the matters of the heart. And, that's why we need Christ to save us, because I'm never going to make my heart clean. It's the only thing that's made me clean in the eyes of God has been, washed in the blood of Christ and his sacrifice and his perfect life for me. I don't have a clean heart in the sense today that I don't ever have, immoral thoughts or feelings or intentions, but I have been washed clean in the courtroom of God for all that I have done, am doing, and will do because of the merit of Christ. And so
you've been given that divine heart transplant, the heart of stone for the heart of flesh. You really are a new creation, but you're not totally new just yet.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, it's I forget the Latin right now, but simultaneous sinner and saint, that's
simul justus et peccator. Yep.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, but that's what it is. And maybe I didn't say the Latin for the sake of everybody else. It's like, what did that guy say? But
is he speaking in tongues?
Yeah.
We need an interpreter.
But that is the reality of, those who come to faith is so many people think the Christian life is about becoming less and less of a sinner, rather than more and more of a receiver of grace, because God is glorified through us coming to him like children and just receiving from him. We think much of the Christian life is about us giving to God our good works. He doesn't need our good works.
He doesn't need you, period. Yeah.
Our good works are washed in the blood of Christ. Our good works are for our neighbor, they glorify God, but they're for the good of others, not for the good of God,
Right.
He isn't going like, oh, like, I'm so much happier with you because you have more good works. It's like, no, he's only pleased with us because of what Christ has done, is that we stand hidden in him, clothed in his righteousness and washed in his blood. And so then we're free. We're not under the law anymore, and that's really what this album is about. And what we're trying to drive towards is this character is living in this world. He wants to be free from the burden of sin. Right?
Yeah.
But with that, so many people struggle to run to put themselves under the law. But we need to be freed from the burden of the law. because we can't be righteous through the law. And, that's kind of where we're hoping to take people.
Love it. Love it. So, Steve, tell us where people can find Wasteland by Wolves at the Gate and find you and Wolves at the Gate in general.
Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. We do have a TikTok, but I open it like once a month.
Yeah. I post and run away.
I always forget that we have it, and I go, oh man, and I open it up, and I'm like, this thing is like gnarly. I don't want to be here. I mean, they're all pretty abysmal, but
yeah, I'm right there with you. Like I use later.com to schedule everything out. And with TikTok, it's literally just make sure it posts. I don't want to look at anything that platform has to offer.
Yeah, it's pretty out there. But I don't really understand it either. But again, I'm also, I'm going to be 39. So
yeah,
I don't.
Yeah, we're good millennials. It was made for me. Way. Yeah, we're good millennials.
It wasn't made for me, and I understand that.
Fantastic. Well, Steve, thanks again for coming on, and everybody else, go listen to Wolves at the Gate's Wasteland album. So go love God, love your neighbor, make some music, and listen to some music. We'll see you next time.